The biggest Bitcoin holder in the world might go public within the next hour, and it's going to be absolutely massive as Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy have absolutely flipped Wall Street on its head. So will they go into the S&P 500, and what are the implications of all of this? We're going to get into all of that. And first, we've got the man, the myth, the legend, Eric V. Sachs in the house. So, Eric, I don't know where you're at. If I could see you on the camera, might have lost you here for a second. But how are you doing? And what do you think of the potential of this? If we've still got you in the house here, we might have some technical difficulties right off the jump. Eric, you there? Oh, goodness gracious. We already lost Eric. Well, he will be back here shortly. But in the meantime, MicroStrategy, they have completely gotten every single qualification in order to join the S&P 500. But there's a slight possibility that they could be denied. Now, what are the full inclusion principles? Well, let's go over that here for first, but there basically needs to be listed as a common stock already on the New York Stock Exchange, which the S&P 500 is already there. It needs to have multiple earnings in the positive area. And with last quarter's earnings, it had 10 billion in revenue and 14 billion in unrealized gains. And these figures are, quote, more than enough for a strategy to qualify. Yet we are seeing the potential of it not happening. Now, because it could not happen, what are the reasons why it could or it could not here with that? So the reasons it could is just simply because of what I lined out. It would be basically a shoe-in if you don't look at just strictly the numbers and everything else. But the committee needs to vote with all of this. So if the committee needs to vote, well, I don't know how many of you guys are there he is. We've got
Boom.
Eric now back in the house. I don't know what happened, dude. We were talking pre-show, and then all of a sudden I hit live, and it just kicks you out. But I'm
Yeah,
going
maybe it's
over,
because we're in the same account here. I don't know. I'm figuring it out, man.
yeah,
Figuring it out just like any of us.
all one day at a time. But basically,
Yes.
what I'm going over is the S&P 500, the inclusion factors for it. What MicroStrategy had to go through essentially is they needed to be a publicly listed company, which check, you meet that box. They need to have a market cap of in the 85th percentile, check. They need to be trading a minimum of 250,000 shares in the 6 months leading up, and MicroStrategy trades like a mag 7, so that's an easy check. And then the most recent 4 consecutive quarters must be positive. So that's a check. But there's a big but with all of this. The committee of the S&P, which are an undisclosed members, they need to vote on all of this to decide whether or not the S&P 500 includes MSTR. So, Eric, I got to ask you, man, what do you think of all of this? And, they're potentially going to vote on this decision here in the next like hour and a half. So do you think that this is a big move for the potential of MSTR and the S&P 500?
Well, I do think it's inevitable at some point. As far as what happens today, in some ways, it's above my pay grade. As this all unfolds, in a lot of ways, it's like super exciting. But if you've been in Bitcoin long enough, it starts to be a little boring. I do think it would be a good event for Bitcoin if we have Michael Saylor get strategy into the S&P. I think that that's a big deal. It's going to provide Bitcoin exposure to a lot more people, which I think is inevitable. However, as far as today goes, I got no idea. It's a coin toss, in my humble opinion. With that said, I guess I would say I got more questions than I do answers. but we all like seeing Bitcoin dominate, and this does seem like a milestone if it is achieved.
Yeah, it definitely is going to be a big achieving one as I'm playing around with some of these screens here to try to figure it out. But I mean, I think that, at the end of the day, it speaks volumes more so as the new ruling that we had at the FASB. I think that has essentially just changed the game back in what we saw in November time. And this is why we're seeing a bunch of different corporations start to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. But I think all of this is very interesting, at least to me. When you look at, we've got the top 100 publicly traded companies here, and I brought this up to you guys last time when we did this live stream, literally a week ago. And I think in that week we've had like 12 or 15 new companies come on, because I know we were under 180 last time we came on. And so we see just basically, more and more of these publicly traded companies start to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. So they're all realizing, hey, cash is trash. But I think the other interesting little tidbit of all of this is just how astronomical Sailor's flywheel has been. Now, for those of you guys who in the chat who know me and my live streams, they know I love to show this flywheel because I think it just lines out just how easy and kind of, but yet revolutionary putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet is. I mean, essentially, strategy issues debt to buy that Bitcoin. Both the market cap and Bitcoin increase. So then it can increase its weight in those indices. So over time, after MSTR joins that S&P 500, as Bitcoin price increases, it's going to be interesting to see just how much, market share strategy can get in there. So, and then it'll keep being able to issue more and more debt. And at the end of the day, this S&P 500 is astronomical strictly because of the amount of volume that is put in. I mean, there's $61 trillion moving back and forth in just the S&P 500 index fund. So it's absolutely taking over the stock market, and it's been extremely top heavy for quite some time. And so, it's basically been 10 companies carrying the entire stock market at a certain point, but now, well, that could be 11 after we see strategies start to come in and change the game here.
Yeah, I think like I said, I think it's inevitable. The strategy play is, I think, the only Bitcoin treasury company that doesn't kind of give me the heebie-jeebies. As a very conservative individual, I think that a lot of these treasury companies are going to get blown up. MicroStrategy, or Strategy now, their cost basis is low enough, and I think that Saylor is clearly a savant, and he's sophisticated enough to navigate through these markets and use all these financial instruments to suck capital out of the traditional financial system and put it into Bitcoin. But the rest of the treasury companies, they are concerning, in my humble opinion. I know some pretty influential, smart people in the Bitcoin space that refer to even strategy as a shitcoin. So I don't know if that's actually how I think about it, but I'm a conservative individual, and my attitude is be humble, stack sats, and be careful with the leverage. If you're not Michael Saylor and you're not a savant, I would tread lightly there. Now, as far as strategy making it to the S&P, obviously that is a monumentally big deal. And looking at the comments here, we got David Sr., actually a good buddy of mine. He says the betting market has them at 26%. So chances are unlikely, according to whatever betting market he is referencing. But this kind of, I don't know, this parallels the Microsoft board meeting in my mind a little bit. Maybe it's not exactly the same, but I do have suspicion. I don't know. I feel like if I were going to take a guess, the can's going to get kicked down the road further. Maybe that's just because I've been in this position before where we're all excited, waiting for big things to happen. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. What time is the announcement? You say market close 4:30 today?
Yeah, so the market, I've tried to look it up before to see if we would be on potentially during all of it, and it says Generally, it's right around market close, so 4 to 4:30 is kind of when they announce it, just to kind of avoid that, the last bull rush at the end of the day. So they try to do it right at market close. So, yeah, man, I'll be curious to see whether or not this actually happens. And maybe if you guys are sticking around here, you'll be able to see our live reactions with all of this, because it's definitely like a hot button topic and what everybody is seemingly talking about here. But to your point and your friend's point about this being a shit coin, I mean, I think a lot of people undermine this fact right here. BlackRock owns 5% of Strategy, and this happened earlier this year. I believe this happened back in February. Yeah, February 7th of this year. And the unique thing about this is that BlackRock had to file this, and they have to submit a filing in order to obtain 5% of the company. So they can't do these things, quietly and kind of, start stacking MSTR shares in the background. A big player like this, when they come in, they really have to be upfront and, promote all this in their filings. So, I think when you see BlackRock have a bunch, and then if you also look underneath the hood, Anti-Bitcoin Vanguard is the largest institutional holder of this. And then on top of it, you have Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan, massively increasing their shares of MSTR since the beginning of this year. I mean, you got to ask yourself, once we just saw, I know a lot of Bitcoiners in the space have talked about this, but we just saw Intel, essentially sell 10% of its entire company to the United States government. So when you look at companies like that, there's always been the backdoor theory. Hey, you know what? Strategy could be the backdoor for, a Bitcoin strategic reserve for the United States, and that Michael Saylor has just been in cahoots with all of this. Now, I don't necessarily know if I agree with that opinion 100%, but I do think it's unique when you're taking a step back and like looking at what could potentially happen here, and play a little devil's advocate. So I mean, Eric, I know you're a little bit more plugged into the cypherpunk area. So I mean, have you heard any potential rumors like that where, hey, you know what, we might see some of Michael Saylor's MSTR get bought out by the government, and that they're secretly buying this Bitcoin for the United States government?
Well, I was on a call yesterday. I probably shouldn't say who I was speaking with. Very credible, influential figure in the space. And he said, with a high level of confidence, that he believes MicroStrategy and their holdings and Coinbase's holdings will be confiscated by the United States government. I don't know the details around how that could happen, obviously. And I used to think that that was an unlikely situation or circumstance. Um, I've become a little bit more open to the notion that there is some sort of backdoor workaround or fuckery, if you will. That's why I think it's just so important to stay conservative and just hold on to BTC in cold storage. I do think what's happening with MicroStrategy is absolutely fascinating. I would never sell any of my Bitcoin to purchase MicroStrategy. I think the only way personally that I would be exposed to MicroStrategy or strategy would be if I had money locked up in a 401k. It does seem like a lot of the strategy enthusiasts think that it's going to outperform Bitcoin. And it might in the near term, it might, but I do think of it as a trade. I don't know if it's this set it and forget it investment like Bitcoin is, obviously. And so for me, as a rather conservative individual, more fascinated by the philosophical implications, the number go up technology gets a little bit, number go up aspect of this protocol gets a little bit boring at times, although it is simultaneously one of the least important things. It's also one of the most important things in Bitcoin, obviously. So with that said, I don't know, man. I'm just here for the ride. I will say, I'm very grateful to be living in this time in history, and stay vigilant. I think that it's expected that there's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be nefarious actors. Like Booth says, we have a system that is designed to steal from you. It can do only that. And we have interstage left, this monetary protocol that's inviolable that nobody can fuck with. And so we're going to see attacks from this existing system. What they look like, I don't know. What Saylor's done for Bitcoin, it's monumental. Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I do. It's interesting as far as 6102. I'm not sure, man. It is concerning to a certain degree, but if you have Bitcoin in cold storage, it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think everybody has been kind of trying to, I mean, I think if you look around and you talk to people of previous cycles, or I mean, I had a good conversation with Mark Moss. He believes that there's not going to be another altcoin season because everybody saw that. But what you kind of think, or I mean, if you want to call them the shitcoin season, I'm fully with you on that. I think the new wave is these treasury companies, kind of like you're lining out, and the big dog is always the one that wins, and that strategy in this case. But I think the unique thing with strategy is just they're so far ahead. They've used so many different, traditional financial tools in order to obtain more debt, to buy more Bitcoin, issued preferred stocks, done the whole nine. I mean, you need Chat GPT to break down all the strategies that Michael Saylor has used. But it's interesting just to see, how much he's been influential on that TradFi world. Because if you kind of sit back and think about it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you need to basically, have these analysts, so to speak, in the TradFi world, essentially look at Bitcoin and just say, hey, you know what? Like, we need to analyze MSTR. So therefore, we need to analyze Bitcoin as something. And that's probably orange pilled more people than we would think, just strictly from the performance of the stock. And, like you said, number go up is people who get into Bitcoin a long time ago. It's probably the least interesting thing now, but you got to remember, like, that's the big driver of the orange pilling is the number go up. And it's interesting that even though we're sitting here at 111,000, and you look at how Bitcoin has been performing, hitting an all-time high not too long ago, I feel like we still have like all quiet on the Western Front. Like, there's not a lot of news coverage around Bitcoin just yet. And that's where I think it's exciting for me, is that, all right, now maybe we get MSTR in S&P 500, even if it doesn't make it into it. It's a conversation today, and it's what people are tuned into. And so either way, if it doesn't, it's going to make headlines. If it does, it's going to make headlines. And then Bitcoin's back in the news. And hey, we're at 111,000. We're like 8-9% away from the all-time high. So we could be climbing back here, and we've got the potential of interest rate cuts and more monetary easing, coming forward. So I think that makes for a big end of the year turn here. And I think a lot can change in this next 3 months, to say the very least.
Yeah, I don't have any particular technical reasons why I feel like we're about to have a price explosion. It's more of an intuitive thing. And then what historically, at this time after the halving, what we're in for like a 3-month rip, right? I saw a post about this recently, alluding to the fact September, October, or the notion that September, October, November are likely to be up months. I don't know. I do think that we are heavily underpriced. It does seem like we're experiencing some paper Bitcoin. I'm kind of surprised when I wake up and I see Bitcoin is not up a couple 100%. I'm more shocked than I would be if it was. And actually, I just want to. So we got some guy here in the comments. Litecoin is needed in this economy. Bitcoin is disappearing. Sorry, buddy. Don't agree. Don't agree. Gosh.
Yeah, so I mean, it
But I,
is kind of like I said, a very let's say interesting to see, these price charts come out because historically, everybody says October, right? We've got August and September historically are the worst able to pull up for us. Here we go. Um, October or August and September are historically the worst months by average for Bitcoin. So, I mean, if you look down here, I don't know how clearly these guys can see it. We'll make it a little bit bigger. But the averages here for September and October, or for August and September, are 1.5% up in August and down 3.7% in Bitcoin's history in September. And then all of a sudden in October, it's up. The average is up 21.8%, and in November, it's 46.02%. So, I mean, if you just look back at the data, the numbers don't lie here. I mean, August, September, pretty slow. People are coming out of the summer, and then all of a sudden, Q4 turns, and boom, we're off to the races. So, I mean, like you're saying, I think, from my perspective, the only thing that we can see as like a technical aspect of it is that usually we see some of these macro signals happen late September. So the next FOMC meeting is in 11 days and 22 hours, and we have a 90% chance right now to cut by 25 basis points, and now a 10% chance to cut by 50 basis points. So that's showing us that the betting markets right now are saying there's literally 100% chance we're going to cut. It's just a matter of how much right now. So it is very interesting when you look at that, because then it's like, all right, then you look at the global M2 money supply chart. You look at that, you compare it to Bitcoin. Bitcoin usually has a, 100-day or so lag. The only one that hasn't cut interest rates really globally yet is the United States. And all these other guys have. So we've seen the global M2 money supply increase. And hey, next up, the United States, the big dog. We're coming to come buy Bitcoin. At least pump maybe the United States bag at this point. Who knows? Maybe we're even buying in the background. But I think all of this is very interesting. And if you break it down from the macros, I mean, you're just going to be one of the chart boys just looking at all these things. I think it's fun to just, talk about, potentially speculate on all of it. But at the end of the day, like you say, Eric, it's the best thing to do is just buy and hold and keep that Bitcoin in cold storage.
yeah, I have a question for you actually. So what happens if strategy doesn't get into the S&P today? When would that come up as an option again?
Yeah, it usually happens like once a quarter, I believe. So once it, if they don't kind of come in this time, then they'll probably be coming in again in another vote. Let me actually look that up just to double check. Um, Real quick, I'll chat GBT it. So yeah, I mean, I think the potential of it getting in today, I think, in my opinion, is a big enough story. Just because, I mean, to be honest, like Sailor and MicroStrategy, they were a zombie company when they started all of this 5 years ago. I mean, you can go back and like look on their on their website. They're very good at keeping it all, very public. I mean, they've had 77 different buys. They started buying back in August 10th of 2020. So they've been doing this for 5 years, and now they're finally starting to try to get included into the S&P 500. And when you look at all the technicals, I think when you kind of break it down, the overall just numbers of the like revenue, the net income, the market cap. I mean, if you look at them, it's essentially a no-brainer. So it wouldn't be against, I guess, the grain here to think that because the S&P or the that because MicroStrategy doesn't get let in, it's because of Bitcoin at that point, or it's because, hey, you know what? We've never seen a company report so much in unrealized earnings like Strategy is going to be doing with their Bitcoin earnings. And so it's just essentially new territory for them. So I wouldn't be surprised if they don't. I see that one guy in the chat said that we have a 26% chance of getting in. When you look at these numbers just from like a technical standpoint, I mean, Warren Buffett would love this company and say it's extremely undervalued. But we get Warren Buffett of today, and he's the biggest hater on Bitcoin on planet Earth. So I think, over time, this will just cause more attention to come to Bitcoin. And like you said, it's a net positive, but in the short term, it might be just a little bump in the road.
Well, it does show how important a Bitcoin treasury strategy is, or saving in Bitcoin, or having Bitcoin on the balance sheet, however you want to say it. I'm curious, are there any other companies in the S&P that are there because of their balance sheet, or is it all based upon earnings essentially? Like, this is the first company that's going to get in there that didn't have mega earnings but has a killer balance sheet, right?
Well, that's kind of, I think, where you're a little off with that, because even though they had a huge balance sheet of Bitcoin, like, part of the qualifications in order to meet it is that you have to have for recent earnings be positive. So even with the FASB reporting, that's only been in line for 2 quarters now. So the previous 2 quarters were just based on Strategy's earnings, and those were positive. And they need to be, the sum of all of it. Granted, this past quarter, Q2 it was like 3 times or 4 times the earnings of the past 3 quarters combined, or something crazy, because of how much Bitcoin went up in the past, or in Q2. So I think, you still need to have those positive earnings. So this might be the first one strictly on just the Bitcoin related holdings, and that's why it's significant. But I mean, if you look at these treasury companies just overall, and I know it's kind of small text here, but number 11 here is Tesla. Coinbase is 10. They both have Bitcoin on the balance sheet and are in the S&P 500. Then we have Block here at number 13. Also in the S&P 500 as well, just recent additions. So, 3 of the top 100. I don't think GameStop's in the S&P 500, but they've got some Bitcoin. I mean, at this point, Trump's Media Technology Group, they might make it. The Bitcoin Standard Treasury Company. I mean, these guys, like, they all have the potential to essentially start scooping up, and this is where it's this flywheel comes into
Hold
a
on,
big
hold on,
play.
go back. Stupid question. Go back.
Yeah.
Is Mara the second largest holder in the world? Is this global?
Yes. Yep. This is global. So they're the second largest at 50. So that's
Look
the
at
difference in the
the
scale.
difference. That is just absolutely crazy. I remember when Samson Mao was talking about max pain in 1M Bitcoin like a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. And one of the things he was talking about is like, oh, if the price goes up too fast, oh, there's all these issues. Stranded UTXOs. One of the things he spoke on is like strategy is not going to get to 1% of the supply. And I was thinking at that time, like, wow, that is interesting. Can strategy get to 1% of the supply? Now they're at 636,000 Bitcoin. That is absolutely incredible. When we were ripping a podcast in the studio a couple months back, one of the things that we were chatting about, I found quite interesting is like, can any company catch strategy? It doesn't seem like it to me. Like, and if anybody's attempt to do so is just gonna push him so far out there, it's just crazy. So does strategy become the most valuable company in the world? Does it get gobbled up, or I don't know, what was it be nationalized by the United States government? It's such an interesting thing, but with that much Bitcoin, that is a lot of power. That is a really big deal. 636,000 Bitcoin. Do you know what he's stacked in the last 12 months? How many coins did he
Yeah.
put on in the last 12 months?
That's That's the interesting aspect here is because if you look at, they report all their buys, right? Like I was showing you a little bit earlier. If you kind of go back, like there's one maybe every month, every couple months or so. But since November of last year, when Trump actually got elected, um, there's basically
Oh
there's
man.
been, out of the 77 buys, what is the math here? 42 started here. So 34 of them have been since Donald Trump got elected. So nearly half of their buys, like weekly buys, have been from, since Trump got elected. 60% of their overall supply has been bought since then. Like, before Donald Trump was elected, they had 279,000 Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Obviously, you guys just saw the number now. Now they have 636. So, they've nearly, they've more than doubled their buy or doubled their amount of Bitcoin on the balance sheet, nearly tripled it since Trump got elected. Now, that's where I think it's, you know, people in the Bitcoin space, I mean, of course, like I'm not a fan of the government either, but I think the regulatory clarity with all of this has just allowed, the guardrails to essentially be off MSTR. And then this is where, it's astronomical because Saylor has come out and said it multiple times himself. The only company that he thinks could potentially catch them is Metaplanet, strictly because there's not a big bond market in Japan because they have negative interest rates like basically all the time. So nobody wants to buy any of those bonds. So if Metaplanet copies Michael Saylor's strategy, the Japanese investor is going to flock towards these Metaplanet bonds because and preferred stock offerings because the bonds essentially you're just giving the money to the government in order to honest like lose money. They're telling you we're going to give you negative interest rates. Whereas, MicroStrategy is going to have a lot more competition with that. And there's still going to be people who are going to want to buy up the US bond market. And so, we've even had Wells Fargo's CEO come out and say that the most unsung hero is that, strategy going into these equity markets with sights on the $300 trillion bond market might be the most underappreciated story of 2025. So, I mean, like, this is what banks are realizing. And Saylor saying, hey, you know what? The only person that could help could potentially capture us is Metaplanet strictly because of the Japanese regulatory clarity and like the lack of desire of Japanese bonds. Now, they've got a long way to go, so I think it's also a little tongue in cheek what Saylor is saying, but he brings up Japan in every earnings call. He brings up Japan in almost every single CNBC news, whatever dump that he's in. And almost every single interview, I hear him bring up Japan. So I think it's interesting. But I mean, at this point, I think it's a race for number two.
Yeah, that makes sense. Gosh, it's incredible. He created this feedback loop. It seems like the more Bitcoin he has, the faster he can buy Bitcoin. You know what also is interesting? Trump Media Technology Corporation, dude, they got yeah, 15,000 coins.
Yeah.
You
Well, I
know,
mean,
that
if you,
seeing that makes me a little less concerned. One of the things I think about from time to time is like if the United States government has this strategic Bitcoin reserve, you have this game theoretic race to figure out how to get into this new monetary system. I don't know if there's ever been a larger incentive to like cause a major crash. Like if Coinbase ended up getting exposed for having less Bitcoin than there's claims to Bitcoin, it'd be like an FTX moment times 10, right? And so sometimes I think like something bad could happen. We got this battle between core and knots and crazy discussions about stuff getting put onto the blockchain and how that could affect one's ability to run a node and all that. And like, it seems like it is a pretty big time as far as what's happening in Bitcoin. But when I see things like Trump's corporation holds 15,000 coins, it makes me feel a little bit better about not having some flash crash. But also, I'm not leveraged. So if we got a flash crash, it's a bummer to the people who are leveraged. So I would I don't know, I just want to continue to double click or strike a highlighter on like, if you're leveraged, make sure it's intelligent leverage and that you don't want to be liquidated, especially with all of these Bitcoin loans, Bitcoin backed loans. If you're going to borrow against your Bitcoin, like just make sure you don't get REKT. There's nothing worse than losing your Bitcoin. Gosh. Anyways.
Yeah, and to answer your question too earlier, I got the Chat GPT bot on it. They go and rebalance every 4 times a year. So we have it here in September, and then the next time won't be until December if they do not make it. So we will figure that out because it meets the technical eligibility, like we said, market cap, profitability, liquidity listing criteria, but the inclusion is ultimately decided by a discretionary committee. And the unique thing of this too is this discretionary committee. I don't know if you're like a college football fan. College football, we know who the committee members are. Here we have no idea. They're like all like secret agents. So we can't go egg their house or something, put a for sale sign out there like maybe some of the college football committee members face if some team does not make the college football playoff. But it's definitely an interesting time. But you brought up something about core Bitcoin Core and the knots debate going on, and I know you've been covering it very well. So I'm curious, why don't you break it down for those people who maybe are here a little bit just for the MSTR discussion, but what is some of this other drama going on in the Bitcoin space for us, Eric?
Oh, well, I actually don't necessarily know a whole lot about what's happening. I guess I've just been paying attention a little bit to, on Twitter or X. I feel like until Elon changes his rhetoric around Bitcoin, I want to still call it Twitter. But anyways, things have taken an interesting turn over the last week as the dialogue has shifted and people are expressing concerns about blowing the op return out to 100,000 bytes. It's my understanding it's at 80 bytes right now. So one's ability to inscribe a JPEG on the blockchain is somewhat limited. If Core pushes through their Core 30 update and you can put a 100,000 byte image into the op return, the concern that people have started to discuss is that really despicable, diabolical, illegal imagery could make itself onto the blockchain. If that happens, the concern that I had immediately when I heard that, and other people have expressed as well, is wouldn't that create a potential landscape for regulatory pushback for the United States government to say, all right, you fucking filthy animals, good job getting it here, we're going to take over now. And Coinbase and BlackRock and Amazon, they can run nodes, but you guys can't. So I do think that there are potential non-monetary use cases for the Bitcoin time chain, blockchain, whatever you want to refer to it as, but inscribing JPEGs is probably not a good thing to be doing. So I will say I lean towards the don't change it, camp. Sailor famously said this, I don't know, a year or 2 years ago, like, just don't change it. Like, don't change this. And so I don't really know exactly what's going to happen if Core pushes through this update. Maybe it's just a bunch of freedom-minded individuals that are concerned about losing this decentralization that we have, because if we lose the decentralization, this would monumentally change things. Now, with all that said, this is more of like a faith-based, spiritual, intuitive feeling that I have. I have a feeling it's going to all be all right, and we're going to win this battle. It seems to me like Bitcoin's a checkmate on dishonesty and scumbaggery and totalitarian central banking overreach. And so stay vigilant. Your node and what software you run on your node is a vote to the network. So I would advise people to dig into this a little bit and make a decision for yourself as to what you see is the best use case for Bitcoin in the future. We don't want to lose this. This is a big deal. This is a big opportunity for our civilization to get beyond plunder and stealing and killing and all this overlord debauchery. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, it takes me back to like the block size wars. I mean, that's when I was first kind of getting into Bitcoin, and it seems like everybody kind of has their opinion. And I think, the free market will kind of play all these things out. It's just like kind of like what we were saying earlier with the, the shit coins and everything like that, the Bitcoin treasury companies kind of coming in. I mean, my opinion is all right. Like maybe you could have some of these guys beat Bitcoin. Maybe you could have the Solanas of the world or the XRPs or whatever you're talking about beat Bitcoin for a month, a week, a day, whatever it is. But I know in the long term, Bitcoin's going to win, and it's just going to be Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. And I think with the core and the knots debate, it's the same kind of deal. Like we're gonna have the free market, and some people are gonna be on the not side, some people are gonna be on the core side, but ultimately, everybody who decides to run the nodes. I mean, we saw it with like what Bitcoin Cash a couple years ago, and all of these other aspects. Like eventually, Bitcoin is gonna win, and whatever version of Bitcoin that is, I'm sure it's the decentralized aspect, and I'm sure like people are just gonna kind of flock back to what works, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think at the end of the day. So I think, you know, we're sitting here talking about some of the news, and I think a lot of the devs maybe just sit back and get a little bored sometimes, man. So maybe they want to spark some of these arguments and stir some things up.
Yeah, I think there's that. And then I also think that some of these devs, they want to just, I don't know, put interesting, cool shit onto the blockchain. I don't think they're, it seems, I don't know, I want to be careful as I say this, but it does seem that there is less of a concern on behalf of the core developers, at least from what I've seen in this debate, about the success of this and liberating humanity from, the negative effects of central banking and this Keynesian economic mumbo jumbo that we're all, exposed to and suffering from. And then, the social layer, I like how Booth speaks to this. It's like there's too many people who know. There's too many people who know and understand what's happening, and they're not going to let that go. And so I don't know if this turns into some situation where Core 30, goes through, and then you got, if Core 30 goes through and one's ability to put stuff that shouldn't be on the time chain on the blockchain, then you're going to have companies like, Mara and all these big dogs, Coinbase, whatever. They're not going to be putting that. They're going to modify the software. They're not going to put bad shit onto the blockchain. So I don't know if this is just like all a moot point, but it definitely got my attention over the last week. It's the most concerned I've been in a while that we have issues. We don't want to muddy the waters. We want to win. So run a node, run the software you support. And if you want to buy JPEGs and do that crazy shit, there's a whole world of altcoins and craziness that you can go get into. Let's keep Bitcoin clean, Let's keep Bitcoin clean. Let's change the world. Once we've fixed the money, then we could fuck around with whatever we want to, but we have a big problem globally and have for a long time with broken money. So I think the first order of business is fix the money. Let's not ruin this, And it's fun watching it take, all unfold. It's fun watching strategy and GigaChat just kill the game. But I think that there's a bigger thing happening. I feel like we're in the midst of a galactic battle between good and evil. And let's make sure that we're going to win this and we can have more freedom. That's important. And then you can sell fucking monkey pictures to whoever you want on whatever other ridiculous chain. But I am of the camp that we need to fix the money, and we don't want to ruin this opportunity. This is a very special thing.
No, 1,000%. I mean, I agree with you. I think, at the end of the day, people are like you're saying, are gonna eventually, run what they think. And, I think getting away from having all the spam on there, I've never really been a believer in that as well. But, I think fixing the money is the most important thing. And, that kind of brings us to what we see, globally as well. Like I think we're getting a lot of politicians starting to realize this. I know you and Robert both do not like, these governments coming in. And I mean, I'm with you on that, but I think fixing the money like we're talking about is part of doing that is, kind of having politicians realize, hey, you know what, we need to, I guess, be on board with this Bitcoin thing, or else we're going to lose power. So we're seeing more of these countries around the globe start to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Of course, we had El Salvador and President Bukele. But I mean, even if you look at Bukele just globally, some people that he has his detractors, to say the very least. Where they don't necessarily love his methods, but I think the cool thing of what we've seen is that El Salvador has essentially done a full flip. People haven't really wanted to travel there before. I don't know if you've made it down there, Eric, but I've made it down a couple times, and I feel safer in El Salvador sometimes than I do in some cities in the United States. So I think Bitcoin has kind of, I guess, incentivized politicians a little bit more to at least make the living conditions in whatever area it is to be a little bit better, as well as fixing the money. So, I mean, I'm very optimistic on, all of these governments bending the knee slowly until, kind of what we described last time with Robert as, having that sovereign individual thesis play out here. But in the near term, I think, with governments, I think, Bitcoiners used to talk about the now they fight a stage significantly, like, almost every single talking head on there was talking about it. And I never really resonated with that. So I think, uh, I see this bright orange future as moving towards a positive light. So, I mean, I think, even these arguments between core and knots, it's just, maybe something for the history books at one point in time. But, in the short term, it seems like everything's getting a little crazy, and maybe we need to be worried about it. But I think in the long term, everything's going to be just fine and dandy here.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's the game theory. Although Bitcoin is very disruptive to governmental overreach and their ability to just endlessly print money to fund things that otherwise the taxpayers would not be into. So in that sense, Bitcoin's a threat, but Bitcoin is also a solution. Bitcoin helps solve problems that the government has. If they can gain that appreciation and tether themselves to this protocol, it's a big deal. And so if you look at the United States and the SBR, I mean, I was shocked the SBR got signed into effect as soon as it did. I figured if Trump was going to do that, it would be like a Hail Mary at the end of his term. But it does seem that these individuals are capitulating into the game theory. This is seems to be one of those things where you get rewarded by supporting the Bitcoin protocol and being a part of it, and you get punished if you don't. So I would just advise everybody to think deeply about Bitcoin and what the implications of this thing are. Look at Peter Schiff as an example. I think at this point, his whole personal brand is a Bitcoin troll. But if he would have just bought some Bitcoin a while back instead of digging his heels in, and he'd have a lot more money, man. He would have a lot more money.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see if I can find the clip. But I remember he said at one point in time, yeah, his biggest regret is not buying Bitcoin sooner. He said that not too long ago. Yeah, here we go. Peter Schiff confesses his biggest regret is not buying Bitcoin sooner. And still, I mean, if you go to you're 100% right. Like if you go to his Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, I mean, I don't know if he's just rage baiting at this point, but he, just essentially with his $1.1 million follow or 1.1 million followers, all he tweets about, his biggest engagements are just are about Bitcoin, So he's like, it looks like Bukele finally gets it. Hopefully El Salvador, he trades the rest of the country's Bitcoin for more gold, like he's just
Uh,
doubling and tripling down on all of these things. And I mean, we've got the shiny pet rock that he loves. And to be honest, like, I think gold will do well. I mean, we've had gold hit new all-time highs here recently. And, gold always seems to lead Bitcoin. So, I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin's not too far behind. But I mean, like, at this point, it's almost comical how much he just refuses to get in on Bitcoin. I think, like, I'm gonna go double check. I'm fact checking myself here live, but I'm pretty sure his website, like, you can pay for his quote unquote services in Bitcoin
I've
as
heard that. I
well.
don't know if it's true. While you're checking that out, we got a comment here I want to address from CB saying completely irresponsible spreading poo like that about government confiscation without any facts or logic. CB, if you're listening, I would advise that you maybe go down the rabbit hole and listen to people like Eric Kaysen and American Hodl who have spoke to this. There's actually a good podcast, What Bitcoin Did with Danny Knowles. I think they recorded it right around the conference. It's Danny Knowles and American Hodl, and he talks about, Bitcoin being adopted by the state, and we want that because they're going to come someday. And how the government responds to this, it's definitely speculative. But the point that I'm trying to make is that it's important to have your Bitcoin in self custody. That's the real important thing. You need Bitcoin in self custody. This is a long play. I think this is more about changing the direction of our civilization than it is about getting rich. If I was trying to get rich, I'd be staring at charts all day, trading, and it's not that. And I also feel like, ironically, the way to get the most is to take the easy strategy, buy some sats, put them in cold storage, and just go on and enjoy your life. And if the government attempts to confiscate Coinbase's Bitcoin or anybody else's Bitcoin, it's not likely that they go around in a 6102 fashion, door to door, trying to get people's Bitcoin. It would be this easy to grab honeypot. So as far as that goes, CB, I'm just advising everybody to stay vigilant and think adversarially. That's the whole reason why this whole fucking thing has unfolded to begin with. Satoshi inscribed in the original block, Chancellor on the brink of bailout. This is a monetary protocol that is supposed to liberate us from central banking and unfair rule sets. This is a game that is same rules for everybody playing. Nobody has the ability to change the rules to benefit themselves at the expense of others. And me personally, that's what I find the most fascinating and exciting about this whole revolutionary movement and new technology and or discovery, however you want to frame it. So thank you for the comments. I appreciate the advice there. But no FUD spreading here. Just strike a highlighter across how important it is to stay vigilant. Stay vigilant. Be sovereign. And if you want to catch 1000x on a meme coin or something, that sounds good too. You could do that. But let's just let's separate money from state and let's make sure we can change the world here.
Amen to that, brother. I mean, I agree with you 100%. But I mean, if you look at this, right? I mean, what, Bitcoin 16-ish years old, 17-ish years old, 16 and a half, 17 years old, whatever you want to call it. I don't know based on the exact date here today, but uh eighth largest asset in the world, only being 16 years old. And, we've had gold that's been around forever. We've had silver that's been around forever. Bitcoin's been as high as the fifth largest asset in the world when, the price was humming. And then, you just see the overall just adoption rate of Bitcoin comparatively to other technologies. Like if you compare it to the internet, Bitcoin's being more adopted quicker than the internet. I mean, all of these things, right? It's at the end of the day, it's money, and it's separating that money from state. And that's what I think everybody has been searching for this entire time. So, I mean, if you look at just, Bitcoin and comparatively to other forms of money and currency in the past, Bitcoin's the only one that could never get co-opted, right? So you got to just, like you're saying, man, stay vigilant, stay for the course, man. It's gonna win. It's just a matter of when, not if, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then another comment we got here, boss man, the natural state of the free market is deflation. That's so important. It is so important. I remember the first time I heard that, I was working, had my headphones in, I was listening to this channel actually when Robert first started podcasting. It was the Booth series. When Booth said that, I was like, holy shit. I took my phone out of my pocket. I pressed pause, and it's like new neural pathways in my brain wired. And it was like, that is so obvious. Why isn't it that more people don't understand that? Supply satiates demand. We're making more of everything, and we're doing so at a faster rate. Maybe not everything, but if supply satiates demand, if you have a big margin, that's an incentive for entrepreneurs and capital to move into that sector of the marketplace, provide that good or service, increase that good or service relative to the demand, then the price is going to come down. Why do we live in a world where prices are going up on almost everything? It's absolutely crazy. So this Keynesian economic model is making people poor. It's bifurcating our society. It's causing a low-grade state of psychosis amongst most of the population. The governmental apparatus responsible for the theft and the debasement of the currency then has to bullshit you, gaslight you, and then implement more restrictions. They have to violate your privacy so they can further violate your property. It's a whole fucked feedback loop. And there's only one exit. There's only one thing, as far as I can tell, in my humble plebeian opinion, that can combat or fix any of this, and it's fucking Bitcoin. And on that note, what the fuck is COSPA? Have you heard of COSPA? I've heard of
I don't
COSPA.
know.
I've seen COSPA a couple times. What the? Why?
It's
Who
the
gives a shit
newest.
about COSPA? When
It's
there's
the
such a
newest
big
Bitcoin,
thing
I think.
happening in the world, why does anybody give a fuck about anything other than what's happening with Bitcoin? It just blows my mind.
I know it's the
Oh,
newest shitcoin that's kind of out there, I think, and it gets a lot
yeah.
of the commenters all riled up here, to say the very least, man. But yeah, I mean, this Keynesian economics, and his last name is just so close to mine, dude. It irks me a little bit, but the assertion that you need the spending to keep going up, it's basically just like kind of saying, hey, we need to always have inflation in order for the market to grow and for the economy to grow. And obviously we Bitcoiners think that that is just total bullshit, and that at this point in time we've just been fed a lie this entire, like, basically our
Yeah, it's one
entire
of the
lives.
biggest lies that it's ever been told. It really is.
Yeah. And I mean, outside of that, I mean, I love to show this website. They haven't updated the data anytime recently, but Govflation, if you guys haven't checked it out, is always kind of a good thing to look back, in my opinion, just on how far off the numbers are just from what they report. So of course, these are the numbers that they were reporting. 2.7, of course, we get that. GDP's numbers, all that stuff. But I mean, you can see in these charts here just how drastically these things change, and they keep moving the bars farther and farther apart. And when you look at just the overall macro economy as well, like, we're seeing things like the job numbers come back with revisions, and literally 1 million jobs got just poof disappeared. And we're seeing more individuals buy more individuals like unable to buy homes, more individuals just seeing the housing markets go down, and all of these different things. And you know we're starting to see the percentages of these rate cuts coming, because this is just the manipulation that they have to do in order to increase that spending. I mean, if you look at, just some of these random companies here, like a Lululemon, we saw just fall off a cliff here from buying because they just had the lowest overall earnings in 9 months. And I don't know about you, Eric, but down here in Tampa, you can't walk a block without seeing a girl wearing these Lululemon yoga pants. So if like the girls aren't out there buying, the yoga pants for their hot girl walks, I mean, what is going on with the overall economy, man? So we need Bitcoin to maybe save the yoga pants out here. These rate cuts come in here soon, and these rate cuts coming,
Yeah.
I think are going to be the floodgates of something incredible here.
Well, I don't know what happened with Lululemon, but I do know that a lot more people are waking up to the fact that wearing plastic clothes is causing health issues. So as far as
That
Lululemon goes, they could pack up and go home. I don't think it's good for humanity. It's another fiat company. Um yeah, we got Javier in here saying 4-year cycle is broken for Bitcoin. Didn't Sailor mention something recently about the winter is not coming There's no more winters coming. You think we're in for a red year, or is it going to be green, 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 green?
So yeah, I mean, that's a big debate going on right now. Are we going to see the end of the 4-year cycles? And I think, you know, I'm curious to hear what you think on that. But I think that, you know, we're still going to have these business type of cycles. I think the halving is a little bit more overplayed than people, I guess give it credit for, simply because, I mean, there's 450 Bitcoin mined every single day. If you look at just the treasury companies alone, they're buying 3 times the amount of the daily supply every single day since the beginning of this year. So if that was the case, we would already had a supply shock, at this point in time. I think that with the long-term hodlers, how they are handling the market, we're seeing a lot of whales hold on to Bitcoin or actually sell off some of their Bitcoin because they reached this 110K mark. And so I think, we would have already seen this coveted supply shock that I like to talk about so much if we had, if the halving was very determinant of that. But if you look back in history, just in the monetary policy with these Keynesian economics and the election cycle in the United States, I mean, we go through these 4-year business cycles all the time. So I don't think we're going to get away from that here. I don't think this is the last super cycle. But what I do think is that, with the volatility, maybe we won't see as much of a downward revision and it'll be more just of an upward swing. And maybe we still get the 50% drops, but we won't get the 80% drops that we saw before because we got these big dogs coming in like the treasury companies, governments that aren't trading necessarily. They're just buying and holding. Unless, of course, Coinbase and BlackRock and these guys are just selling everybody paper Bitcoin. But I think if they're actually buying Bitcoin, the asset, well, they're going to have the quote unquote stronger hands at this point in time, simply just because there's more regulations around it. But I'd love to hear what
Yeah,
you think, man.
I do think that there's some paper Bitcoin in the market. To what degree, I have no idea. Um, I do think also we're going into a easing cycle with the Federal Reserve. I think we're in a unique circumstance where the Federal Reserve has kept interest rates up after the massive COVID print. And the system as a whole has to continue to debase to stay solvent. We live in a deflationary world, and we have a debt-based monetary system where the monetary units are being lent into existence as debt against assets. Mortgage-backed securities, T-bills, whatever, right? You got fractional reserve banking expanding M2. So if they stop expanding the fiat currency supply, you'll have a major insolvency and there will have to be some sort of big bailout. So we are going into a printing cycle, or the rate of printing is going to increase. That, and then the other thing I think about often is effectively we're at a $2 trillion market cap, give or take, at this point. I think about it like the plebs, the peasant class got us here, and now real money is here. Corporations and nation states and super ballers have less regulatory friction or hurdles to get over or through to get into this asset class. It is orders of magnitude better than anything else you could hold your economic energy in, and the world is figuring that out. And on that note, we got Mick Hoddle. I think he's debating one of these CASPA individuals. He says, I've done the research. Keep doing yours, my friend. I used to hold CASPA, but I kept learning about Bitcoin and came to the realization Bitcoin is the only horse in the race. Yes, Mick Hoddle, I agree with you, and so do many other people around the world. There is no second best. There's no second best. There's no point in holding anything other than Bitcoin, in my humble opinion. I mean, maybe if you want to fuck around and have some real estate, you want to buy some stocks, you want to do some trading or whatever, as long as you have a solid Bitcoin position first, I think that's the most important thing, is to make sure you got a decent Bitcoin position before you go and mess around. So,
Yeah, and I mean, I think the other thing that is, I guess, under talked about at this point too is just how many days we've been above 100K. It's almost like it's a given at this point too, because we were talking earlier about, the potential of some of these other market cap coins, some of these other smaller ones. I mean, essentially there's, potentially those pump and dumps. But if you look at it, we've held a 100K for over 100 days straight. I mean, so this is basically the new normal now, where it's like, hey, you know what? We've got 100K. It's essentially a shoe in. I mean, I feel like if we got below 100K right now, it would be, catastrophic at this point, where people would just be freaking out. But I think that at the end of the day, this is, just kind of the new normal. Everybody's looking at Bitcoin and saying, hey, you know what? We're expecting it to be over 100K. And it's getting boring. Whereas, I don't know about you, man, but talking about 100K Bitcoin, I mean, maybe I believed it at one point, but I mean, just to see where it is right now, I'm kind of shocked to see how just like, content everybody is with just 100K at this point. Like, we should be here at this point. But I feel like, man, we still have a long way to go. And, when you look at all of the different factors running around, right? I mean, we got Bitcoin on OTC desk. I think I showed this to you guys last time, but there's 155K from the known OTC desks that we've got right now. And then we got Bitcoin on exchanges. I know I love to show this chart here as well, but we've got 2.24 million left on exchanges. And that's, I think, including some of those customer held coins. But hey, you know what?
I think that's predominantly customer held coins. We chatted a
Yeah.
little bit about that. I've thought more about it, but I haven't done any specific research. There's no way that those coins aren't owned by the exchanges for sale to people. Those are definitely customer coins. Being on the exchange, they're one step closer to being liquidated as opposed to if they were in cold storage or not. But I think we are in for a supply shock. That seems pretty inevitable at some point. As far as 100K, it's really interesting. It's like watching the paint dry. As you're in Bitcoin, you're like, wait a second, this is taking forever. What's going on? And you zoom out and you're like, oh yeah, well, we're actually fucking shredding. It's killing the game. So once again, be patient, enjoy life. Make sure you got your cold storage set up proper. If you got a lot of Bitcoin, get a geographically distributed multi-sig. If you're not sophisticated enough to do that, use some sort of provider. But this is such a big deal. Sometimes I get really frustrated with the people who don't understand the magnitude of this opportunity. This is why I am so adverse to investing or trading any other thing. This is the biggest opportunity we have had, borderline ever. So why would you risk that? Why would you risk that by leaving your coins on an exchange? Why would you risk that by trying to buy Caspa? You have this, it's borderline certainty. It's the most probable thing in the marketplace that a fixed supply asset becomes the dominant asset in the marketplace. There's no other use case for Bitcoin. I guess maybe the core guys and the inscription guys would argue, but it's only money. You can't live in it. You can't go drive it. It's not Apple stock. It's literally just money. So money has infinite demand. Everybody in the marketplace wants money. Not everybody in the marketplace wants a house in Miami or in Tampa. Not everybody in the marketplace wants a Bugatti. Not everybody in the marketplace wants a pair of Jordans. But literally every person on planet Earth wants more money. Money is a call option on any good or service the marketplace can produce. It has infinite demand. If you compare infinite demand with true scarcity, you have the apex monetary instrument. It's that simple. It's supply and demand. If you have something that cannot go up in supply as the price goes up, it's going to literally destroy it all. It's going to fucking just shit on the rest of these monetary instruments or assets. It's so obvious, and the opportunity is really, really big. And what I can say about the historical, the history of Bitcoin is the people who sold their Bitcoin, lost their Bitcoin, or, ignored Bitcoin, they regret it. I think that's the thing that is likely to continue. I don't know about the power law. I don't know about TA. Saylor famously said it. All your models are destroyed. So as fun as it is to sit here and watch all of this stuff, it is in some ways painfully obvious that Bitcoin is going to dominate, that strategy is going to shred. And just, take the simple strategy. The simple strategy is the winning strategy. There are people who made money with altcoins, but I would argue that most of those people exited their position at some point. I don't know too many people that are like Ethereum maxis. And the ones that are, they're kind of odd if they exist. So just do the research. Think about it. Think for yourself. And if you don't like Bitcoin, that's cool too. Don't buy Bitcoin. That's fine. This is a world with a lot of optionality, but from the supply and demand perspective, it seems to be pretty obvious. We're literally increasing the supply of just about everything on planet Earth at a faster rate than we are currently increasing the supply of Bitcoin. So it's pretty simple. Do you want to increase your purchasing power? You want to do so in a way where you don't have to pay attention and watch to make sure that, Elon doesn't go on Joe Rogan and rip a fucking blunt and your Tesla stock goes down right before you need to sell some so you can move or do your thing. Like, just simple strategy. Buy Bitcoin. Buy Bitcoin and chill. Enjoy the ride.
Amen to that, man. I absolutely love that rant. But I mean, I think I always revert back to this one fact when it comes to the altcoins and everything is that, there's been one altcoin that's beaten Bitcoin on 2 3 month periods separately. It was Dogecoin simply because Elon tweeted about it, and then another time because Dogecoin had its initial run up. And so since then, in a 3 month period, Bitcoin's always going to be the winner, right? I mean, sure, whatever. You could throw darts at a board, maybe hit something that beats Bitcoin in a short period of time, day, week, month, or something like that. But in the long term, you could just buy Bitcoin, stay humble, stack those sats. And then at the end of the day, man, you can just live your life. And I know we got a big chat and everybody's blowing it up. Make sure you guys are subscribing to this channel and hitting that like button for us, because we've got 345 of you guys in here with us. I think it's more than double than we had last week. We're going to be coming to you guys every single week, so make sure you guys are hitting the bell notifications so you know when we're going live and can join. At least me and Eric. I know Robert will pop in every now and then too. So, I think on top of that, man, we've got some exciting times here, and the potential of joining strategy, joining the S&P 500 is just a little blip in what we have going on, because, like your rants are saying, at the end of the day, Bitcoin's going to win. This is just another, maybe a page or two in that overall Bitcoin story. But, the book's still being written, and we're not even at the end of the first chapter, it seems, man.
Yeah, I will say it's very exciting watching this unfold. And my passion comes from this is if this works, this is going to change the world. This is going to make the world a better place. And that's really more important to me than trying to figure out how to catch 1,000x and go buy a Ferrari. I want to be able to leave a better place for my children and everybody else's children. This Keynesian economic model, as we're debasing the currency and we're increasing the debt, we are shitifying the future for our children. It's really one of the most despicable things that we can do. And you're combating that by buying Bitcoin. And if this works, we're going to live in a very abundant world. And so I'm more of a revolutionary than I am a prophet maxi. I want to see the world a better place. I think it's, a lot of things that are happening in the world are pretty upsetting, with the abundance and the technology that we have. Why are there people starving to death on the fucking streets, And so for me, I'd like to see that change. And I think Bitcoin is the fastest way to affect real change in the world in a meaningful way. And in that sense, it's such a big deal. Such a big deal, And so I went all in on Bitcoin. I was hedged up until the end of 2020. I had a significant Bitcoin position relative to my net worth. But I came to the conclusion in 2020 that I want to see the world change, and so I'm going to put all my money into this monetary protocol. That's a vote for freedom, a vote for abundance, a vote for the change in the world. And at my age, if the whole thing blew up, I know at the end of my life that I at least tried to affect positive change in the world. And so, and at this point, I would say, and Sailor's literally said this, all the risk has been stripped from the asset. Bitcoin is a better buy at 111,000 or whatever it is today than it was at 40,000 a year ago, 10,000, in 2020, 3,500 after COVID hits, it crashes. It's a better buy today. And as long as Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure and it exists, on average, it'll appreciate at a faster rate than everything else in the marketplace with a high level of probability. So keep it simple. Keep it simple. Enjoy the ride. Take care of your family, and think about the future for your children. This is a good time to work on making the world better.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, at the end of the day, this is something that I mean, I'm very passionate about as well, strictly because, I mean, if you look at the overall stock market, right? I mean, we had a huge I mean, I hinted at it here the other a little bit earlier, but we had a huge cut in the jobs report. And the S&P 500 just hit a new all-time high. Gold is at it's like beating the S&P 500 by like 3 or 4x from year to date right now. And so the stock market is continuing to rise, and jobs are continuing to be stripped away because people are just worried about the overall economy, right? But if you look at the S&P 500 hitting those all-time highs, I mean, to buy a quote unquote share of the S&P 500 index, it's $6,500 right now. And I don't know about you, but I don't think the average person has $6,500 just laying around to get a share of the S&P 500. Of course, there's different indexes where you can get a little piece for a couple $100 here or there, but the point is that you could buy a fraction of a Bitcoin. You could buy some Satoshis for $1. Like, everybody, in the United States probably has like 25 cents lying around. You can start your DCA in. I think you could do it on Strike and some of these other platforms for simply just like 25 cents. So you can get in, you can get started, and it's one of the easier assets to get in and just use as a savings technology and get a piece of that, $2.2 trillion asset for very cheap. And I think, one thing that I run into a lot when I'm trying to orange pill people is some of that, I guess, whole number unit bias. I'm too late to Bitcoin, all of these different excuses here or there. But I think at the end of the day, if you could just, maybe we should start talking about it in Satoshis instead of talking about it in like whole Bitcoin, just the overall price, like what a
Oh,
dollar.
that day will
Yeah.
come. Actually, sorry to interrupt you, but when you're looking at the S&P, what is it? What, 6,000 and some change, right?
Yeah.
For the S&P. In dollars. In dollars. I saw a chart, maybe you can pull one up, I don't know if you can or cannot, of the S&P over the last 100 years, denominated in dollars, adjusted for M2. So it looks like all these things are appreciating. You got all these real estate moguls that are like, oh yeah, the house is going up in value. No, it's going up in value in dollar terms. The house is not going up in value. It's losing value like a car does. Everybody knows that a car is a liability. It's not a good investment. It's going to lose value. The issue is that the dollar is losing value fast enough that it creates the optical illusion of your real estate going up in value, but it's not losing its purchasing power fast enough so that the car appreciates in value. And so I'm sure in countries that have experienced hyperinflation, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, whatever, you got cars going up in value, right? And so you got to think about, is the algebraic equation complete? Are you measuring the value of something in another moving metric? If you are, you need to complete the algebraic equation by adding in the amount of monetary units in that supply. So in this case, it would be adjusting for M2. A lot of people, that's one of the things I get, a little frustrated with at times, is that optical illusion. People think that their assets are going up. They may not be. You need to adjust for M2 to know if you're actually getting ahead. Another easy way to do this is if you got a portfolio that's appreciating at 7, 8, 10% a year, and if M2 is appreciating at 7, 8, 10% a year, then you're not getting ahead. You're just treading water. So there's, whatever the debasement rate is the hurdle rate. And there's like I forget the guy's name, but there's like a famous, clip flying around that went viral of this, I don't know, Harvard professor, he's in hedge fund manager, some shit, right? And he's like, yeah, I didn't realize that if the inflation's at 10% and my portfolio is going up at 10%, I'm actually not getting anywhere. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, 100%. And I couldn't find the chart exactly, but it some guy had this tweet. He goes by the Wealth Squad Chris. But the average annual rate of increase of global M2 money supply from 2000 to 2023 is 7.3, and that's the average growth of the S&P 500. Since 2000, it's 7.1. So
So you're not
basically,
getting ahead.
yeah, so you're not even getting ahead. The S&P 500 essentially is just that, M2 money supply. And if you look at I think it's the top 10 stocks relative to like the rest of the stock market, it's basically like the S&P 490 is drastically behind, but the top 10 stocks are, you know, essentially just crushing everybody. So if we didn't have the Teslas, the Mag 7 and the top 10 here, it would be, essentially the stock market would be underwater at this point. So like you said, it's I mean, I can't, maybe I'll try to find it and pull it up, but it's like that real estate, the stock market meme where it's like you think you're dunking the basketball, but in reality, it's just the dad lifting up the kid dunking the
That's
basketball.
funny.
I mean, that's how you think it is with real estate, stock market, all of these things. You think, oh, I'm some genius, but in reality, it's just, hey, I'm avoiding the dollar, and I think that's what everybody's starting to realize. And I mean, you're seeing it from governments too. Governments are buying up gold. Governments are buying up Bitcoin, or at least talking about it. Maybe there's some speculation out there that a lot of governments are buying Bitcoin, or at least having these conversations. So, as we get farther and farther in this development of Bitcoin and the debasement of the dollar, more people are going to flock away from the dollar and flock towards something like Bitcoin. And I think it's just a matter of time here.
Yeah, I think the bigger deal is that people are going to flock away from all these inferior assets. You have all sorts of different flavors of counterparty risk amongst the whole marketplace as far as assets, things that you can buy to store your value. And Bitcoin has none of those issues. Your real estate, you have 1% annual average for maintenance costs, you're paying a mortgage. The advantage of owning real estate historically is that you could leverage it to buy more real estate. People are shorting the shitty currency. They're going short the currency and long an asset that's harder than the currency that you can easily leverage. I would argue that the real estate market is not going to do what it has done over the last 30 years in the next 30 years, because you have a better instrument that you can hold your economic energy in. You can take it anywhere you want. Like, I just moved out of California to Florida. I'm stoked on being in Florida. I love my life in California. It was a beautiful place. But it was very easy for me to take my property from California and take it with me here to Florida. And so you have all these issues. You got, like I had mentioned earlier, Elon Musk could smoke a blunt on Joe Rogan. Your stocks could have problems. You could have capital controls. You got entropy. You have tenants. You could have, some tenant of yours could start cooking meth in your house and wreck the place. I mean, there's all sorts of issues, and Bitcoin is pretty much free of all of those things. And so over time, I think about it as like the great demonetization. All these other assets are going to be demonetized over time, and that economic energy is going to find its way into Bitcoin because it's just that much better. And so I think most people in the world that have a surplus don't save it in dollars. So this is more of a demonetization than it is like people ditching the dollar for Bitcoin. I think that they're already ditching the dollar for other assets. I just think that Bitcoin is going to become a larger and larger percentage of that asset basket.
1,000%. And I think it's all coming here. And I mean, I love to show this little graphic here from Bitcoin Magazine Pro. I mean, you see from 2017 to 2025, the average house went from 337 thousand, maybe 338,000 almost, to nearly 420,000. Nice. And then we get it go from 24 Bitcoin to 4 Bitcoin. So, I mean, it just depends on what you're pricing it in. And I mean, hey, I don't know about you, man, but I've had my fair share of renovations that I need to go through. I mean, I've got guys working on my shower back here today. They're making things dry and everything like that. But everybody's like, oh, this breaks. You got to fix this. Hey, the tenant doesn't necessarily like how the shower looks, so I got to fix that. Little things, but it always adds up to this cost. But hey, it's supposed to be this holy grail investment, when in reality, my Bitcoin in cold storage has caused me zero stress, and no extra money. Maybe just buying like a Trezor or a Ledger or something like that, but not thousands of dollars just going into something that's going to depreciate down the line, to say the very least.
Yeah, it takes energy to sustain and maintain ownership of basically every other asset. You're either paying it yourself or you're having somebody is siphoning it off of you. You're using an investment firm, you're paying a percentage. You're being diluted as stock prices go up. Corporations are incentivized to issue more shares. Gold price goes up. Peter Schiff does a backflip, but then unprofitable miners become profitable and they start dumping gold on the marketplace. Like, gold was a really good asset before he had bulldozers and computers. But your Bitcoin doesn't take very much energy to maintain ownership of it. I mean, it's so much better. It's ridiculous, And I think people are scared of the fiat volatility, but Bitcoin, when Bitcoin crashed from $67,000 to $17,000 a coin, and after the FTX blow up, nothing really changed within Bitcoin. Bitcoin went from weak hands to strong hands, or it went from over-leveraged individuals to people who understood and wanted to buy it. But the actual monetary protocol didn't change. The amount of units within the ledger or whatever, that didn't change. It's exposing the volatility. It's showing us how volatile our existing financial system is. As soon as the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, people can't borrow, the velocity of money decreases, people need to now sell off assets to service their debt. It creates a downturn in the economy. But Bitcoin doesn't have any of that. And so, really simple. Really, really simple. Simple strategy is the winning strategy. Stack sats, chill, enjoy your life. Try to live a long life if you can. Eat good food and take care of your family. And remember, the only thing that you can't get back in this world is your time. So use it wisely. And yeah, chill, raise the vibe, have a good time, enjoy life. You want to change the world, start by changing yourself, start by adding value, buy Bitcoin, keep it simple.
There we go. Keep it simple. I think that's a great place to wrap it up, man. So do you have any other parting words before we tell everybody adios here on this great Friday evening, as the decision will probably come in the next hour or so for MSTR? I know everybody's sitting on the edge of their seats, but yeah, man, any last parting words for us?
I don't know. Just enjoy life. It is a beautiful world. There's a lot of things that are happening in the world today that could get people disgruntled. You can end up doom scrolling on Twitter and you could think the world is fucked because that's all you're exposed to. You watch some of that stuff, the algorithm is going to pump more stuff like that out to you. But the reality is that I think the world is a better place today than it has been in the past, even though we have a lot of bad things happening. Yeah, be positive. If you want to change the world, it starts by changing yourself. And I think that when you change the way you look at the world changes, and Bitcoin changes the way that you look at the world.
Amen to that. Yeah. So make sure you guys are hitting the subscribe button here and hitting the like button, checking out Eric everywhere. He's got a great Twitter account and all that. Check me out on Green Candle as well, if you guys want to check out some more of my talking head rants. And yeah, we'll catch you guys all next week. We're doing these every Friday, so make sure you're hitting the bell notifications. And Eric, man, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, man, this was a good one. Also, I want to just say we got questions here about strategy. The announcement hasn't happened. That's announced in an hour from now.
Yeah, so it'll be announced, I guess, like close of market. So it'll be happening here very soon. They don't usually give a direct time, so everybody will be eyes glued on Twitter. So I'm sure we'll chirp about it a little back and forth on Twitter. We'll get the Twitter fingers ready here right now. But yeah, I mean, and who knows when this will actually be announced? It could be in the next 20 minutes. It could be in the next 2-3 hours. Who knows at this point?
Cool. Well, interesting stuff. Appreciate you. Appreciate everybody who watched. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Stack sats and chill. Be happy. It's a beautiful world.
All right. We'll catch you guys all next week.